हेलो, कौन से?
हाँ, हल्का।
Good evening. Uh, we are happy to have Dr. Sajaudeen with us. Sajaudeen is an assistant professor at the Center for Diaspora Studies at the Central University of Gujarat. Sajaudeen did his initial studies. Sajaudeen is basically from Maharashtra. He did his initial studies at Maharashtra, and then did his masters at the National University, where I was also there. And then he joined University of Hyderabad for MPhil and then PhD. He completed his MPhil and PhD from University of Hyderabad. Sujaudin is a nice human being. He also engages a lot with academics. He has traveled widely to Taiwan and other places. And recently, he'll go to USA for some Israel for some scholarship and some scholarship. Today we'll be speaking on migration, inequality, and upward mobility. Uh, and interestingly, this is our, after 2 years or so, this is our first offline lecture in case of this. Before that, during 2019, 2020, a lot of this offline discussion at the university campus and case of this. But due to lockdown and the last 2 years, we had such thing, but we had online, lot of online lectures. To record this lecture and for our friends sitting in different places, we are doing it online also. So without taking much time and already we are running late, I invite Sujaudeen to speak something on this topic. Then we'll discuss. So, thank you. What to you?
Thank you so much, Saleh bhai. I am very happy to be here at base office. And at the outset, I would like to thank all the and congratulate all the members of base Bengali Academia for Social Empowerment, which is going to be a base for upward mobility of the Bengali community, particularly the Muslim community here in the West Bengal. So, a very good evening to all of you. It's a hybrid mode lecture, so I'll be not able to listen to your queries, so you may kindly type it in the message. We shall discuss. If you have any queries, comments, and suggestions, are also highly welcomed. So today, I titled this topic as migration, inequality, and upward mobility in India. So we will be generally discussing about the inequalities, what are the different forms of inequalities, and how inequality affects migration and how migration affects inequality, further to upward mobility. Uh, so I would basically focus on how migration helps on upward mobility along with the challenges within this upward mobility. If we talk about the inequalities in general, so according to one of the studies, only 1% of the world population controls 50% of its wealth. 1,800 million people in the world live in extreme poverty. So this is a general study, but when we talk about, we'll come to context of India. But before we come to India, let us know about the different forms of inequalities. It's a social inequality, educational inequality, economic inequality, political inequality, and environmental inequalities. And some of the scholars have also argued, and I do believe that economic inequality is the key to all other inequality. And this particular economic inequality drastically affects on the social inequality, health inequality, and political inequality, educational inequalities, and so on. So how to up, come out of this economic inequality. So, since I am into this migration and diaspora studies from last couple of years, you can say from a decade, so I observe that migration is helping a lot in achieving developments in general and upward mobility in particular, mostly for the people who are from the backward classes, backward castes, and minorities in the context of India. So, through this observation, I will be going to discuss the challenges that we have in India and how we could overcome from those challenges through this kind of upward mobility with the help of migration. And another part of another reality of when we talk about migration is that migration, the huge migration, is also a sign of inequality. So, when we talk about reducing inequality through migration, so it's also one of the signs. And in terms of challenges to migration, when we say migration reduces inequality, but to initiate migration, economic help is needed. How will one migrate? If I say that there are handsome wages in the developed countries, so how an individual, be it skilled or unskilled labor, will migrate to Gulf or to UK, USA, or your other European countries, or China for that matter, or other developing and developing countries. So, international mobility has another economic challenge to reduce the economic inequality. So, we'll come to that point. How can we, overcome from this? But as I said, if we look at different, pattern of, minority lives here in India, they are being victim of all those inequalities that as I said, starting from economic, social, political, health to education and environmental inequalities. Environmental equality is another important part. I think some of you can check it up for their studies. For example, most of the backward class areas, locales, or Muslim localities or Dalit localities are drenched with the uh, most of the time, dustbins, garbage stations, sanitations, water. These are the basic, environmental inequalities that we could see in these areas. So one can think about it. So if we talk about South Asia inequality, so from 1990s to 2013, the inequality rate increased from 27% to 33 to 34%. And after the South Asia, you have Africa, the sub-Saharan Africa, which has a 50% inequality rate. So day by day, inequalities are increasing in general, and particularly for this minority and backward classes in South Asia and India in particular. So, how if we talk about Muslims in India? So, according to Pew Research data of 2021, there are 20 crore Muslims in India. So, which is huge in number. But despite this, the lack of opportunities, opportunities in terms of job, in terms of education, in terms of political opportunity, representation, discrimination, and the selective development, this particular community is a victim of growing poverty. The education rate is also not good among this community. So there is and more importantly, one of the surprising fact is that everyone is studying, everyone is educating, but low education is the one thing, and If you see that 10 students are graduating, out of which only one is hardly able to get the job. So education, we are being educated, we are being working, government is working, community centric organizations are working to provide good quality education and so on and so thing. But the output of education is not coming. Employment is not coming. So that is reducing day by day, and there are various factors. And as I think I can, I'll tell you some of the, observations from such a committee. I think all of you might have read it, but I have pointed out certain things. And if you look at the General Development Index of India, India has been doing well in terms of reducing poverty and improving crucial human development indicators and so on and so things. But when it comes to Muslim, the largest minority of this country, they are lagging behind, even below the poverty index, as well as below the other comparatively backward classes, that is Dalits in India. So, and such a committee observes that there is the poor representation of Muslims in the employment market was highly over and over again across all the states of India. Poor representation of Muslims in both government and private sector, that is organized sector. And this committee's attention was also drawn on the lack of Muslim representation in the positive position of power. It also lacked the Muslims in public employment, in the bureaucracy, policy, judiciary, and so on, and has been a matter of great concern. And such a committee also observed, to the previous point that I was talking about, students are acquiring education, they are becoming qualified, but most of the time in the interviews, they were being discriminated just because of their religious identity. So these are some of the observations that such a committee has come up with. But if you look at the constitutional provision for the equal empowerment or equality, as some of the articles like article 14, 15, 21, 25, 26, there are a lot of articles 29, 30, and 35. These are some of the articles which talks about equality in general, but particularly the article 15, which prohibits the discrimination on the basis of religion, caste, race, sex, and birth of place. But despite this, I think, if I'm not wrong, you might all agree with me that we all face discrimination at some point of time in different sectors of our society, whether it's educational, whether it's a workplace, whether it's a society, and so on so place. So I think we have been discussing also, I think, in our previous discussion with Kazri, what is his name? Aziza, that there is a discrimination, but we are not able to articulate that discrimination into discourses, which is one of the important factor that I think we all being educated, being sensitized towards the uh, inequalities, we should, I think, could take it up. And that's international framework, constitutional framework, but there are also some international frameworks like United Nations, that SDG goals. There are 17, sustainable development goals, which also talk about reducing inequalities, particularly uh, SDG number 10, which talks about reduce inequalities, because according to that report, United Nations report, 2 in 10 people face discrimination. Out of 10 people, 2 people are discriminated on various grounds, whether it's caste, class, gender, religion, language, and so on so thing. So and if we look at the development agenda, so this report observed that one cannot progress without inclusive development. if we leave certain community behind, consciously, unconsciously, deliberately, and unintentionally, they are going to be, hindrance for the sustainable development goals. This is what, sustainable development goals agenda is. So therefore they work for the, reducing inequality. And according to this report, United Nations report, 70% of the global population is facing inequalities. 70%, it's a huge number. So on the various grounds, out of which, when we talk of India, so religion is becoming primary indicator of inequalities in India, along with caste, and which is increasing day by day, which has a, which will have a drastic impact on the general sustainable development goals of India. And if we talk about this particular, segment of SDG 10, which talks about reducing inequalities, within this, I will not go with all the 7 subsections of reduce inequalities of sustainable development goal, but two points are very important in this. 10.7, facilitate orderly, safe, regular, and responsible migration. This is very important thing, and it's not. That was my observation, but it's United Nations Sustainable Development Goal also talk about facilitate orderly, safe, regular, and responsible migration and mobility of people, including through the implementation of planned and well-managed migration policies. Of course, the UN leader must be, looking at the migrants' inequalities that migrants face, whether it's terms of, and these are the challenges. If we talk about the international and internal migration, the challenges of the migrants are massive in another way. Although they are earning handsome money, although they are gaining comparatively nice, handsome prices, but but even then, they are having a lot many psychological, economic, and health oriented, political oriented challenges. We'll come to that part. So the second point, global sustainable development 10.B, talks about encouraging official development assistance and financial flows, including foreign direct investment, to states where the need is greatest, in particular least developing countries, Asian countries, small island developing countries, and landlocked countries, and so on so countries. So the second part. So within these 10 sub goals, these two are very crucial. Yeah, I think is it fine now? So, sorry. So when we talk about migration and development, I begin with these sustainable development goals because it UN also has recognized migration as a part of development process. So migration and development has a close nexus, close connection. And how many of you are migrant here? Can you raise your hands? Okay. How many of you are not from this particular Kaikhali? Yeah. All of us. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people who are sitting here, they are not locals of this thing, this particular place. So we all are migrants. We all are migrants. We all are migrants at some point or the other point of in our life. The reason being, why do you migrate? Why do you migrate? Why do you migrate from Murshidabad to this place, Kolkata? Job opportunities, higher job opportunities. So when you talk about the skill migrants, they look for the job options. But even when it comes to unskilled migration, Unskilled migrants also do migrate because of the high wages. High wages is one of the basic reason behind all both skilled and unskilled migration. But some people are not able to migrate because of various economic reasons, as we discussed. We will come to the challenges part. There we will discuss exclusively about the challenges and how we can overcome from those challenges. So, as I said, migration has a close nexus with development, and along with this, it is a universal phenomenon. People from starting from Adam alayhi salam to today, and to the next generation, whoever would come, they they did migrate, we do migrate, and people would migrate again. Despite the security, constraints and many other laws, whatever comes in, but human mobility will not stop. If human mobility stops, human development stops. So, and there are different scholars who talk about the, they try to conceptualize, critically understand the human migration. Human migration. There are migration of animals and birds, and we will not go into that debate. But since we are talking about human migration and human development, so if we look at the factors which push people to migrate, that includes social factors, economic factors, religious factors, political factors, and environmental factors. These are some of the factors which are responsible for people to migrate from one place to another place. Migration could be anything. Migration starting from me coming from home to office is a migration. In one of the locality here and coming here is a migration. Everyday migration. Everyday migration too. Migration has diverse categories and types. City to city, rural to rural, rural to urban, state to state, nation to nation, subcontinent, continental migration, and this is how it will go on. Tomorrow, some of you might discuss about migration from Earth to Moon. So it has a diverse category, types. So in general, we discuss in two primary categories of migration. That is internal, and another one is international migration. So the factors which are responsible are poverty is a basic factor, low wages, fear, safety, inequalities, unemployment, inequalities on the basis of caste, class, religion, race, so and so. Those are also factors which push people to migrate. And what are the pulling factors which attracts people to migrate? Employment, living standard, high wages, and health, security, safety. These are the latest phenomena that are being added. Yeah, many things which are being added. But these are some of the basic, challenges, basic things which attracts people to migrate. So, and if we talk about internal and international, basic two examples that we will discuss, two types of migration, international migration, and if we talk about international migration, there are 281 million people in this globe are internationally migrants, according to United Nations Department of UNDESA's data by 2020. That is around 3 to 4% of the people are internationally migrant. But when it comes to and within the international migration, India shares a huge percentage because of its huge population, because of its growing, job competitions in India, and because of it's able to produce the quality of educations and people are able to get jobs in the international markets. And therefore, the Indian diaspora, we will not talk about Indian diaspora as such because most of the Indians who are settled in India, they don't send remittances. But the NRIs, That is, according to Ministry of External Affairs data, we have 70 million Indians who are residing in different parts of the world, according to 2020 data. 17 millions is a huge. So, followed by China, Mexico, and so on. So, this chunk sends enormous remittances, the money to India. I'll come to that part, to the remittances, but before we go to remittances, I would like to tell you about this is international mobility of India. Now coming back to internal mobility of India. If we see the internal mobility, so according to census of 2011, one of every 3% in India is a migrant. If we talk about 3% in any context, out of those three, every Indian is a migrant. So that means 4,055.8 million Indians are migrants according to 2011 census data. So out of three, every one individual is migrant in India. So you can imagine the migration. You can imagine the huge mobility of people in and outside of India. And the reason is uh, economic opportunities. If one is earning 100 rupees in some of the village of Bihar and he is coming to Kolkata, earning 400 rupees in Kolkata, comparatively, he is earning more. Similarly, when it comes to international migration, uh, a person who is earning 20 lakhs per annum in India is earning 1 to 1.5 crore rupees in the developed countries. Because I happened to see in the last meeting visit of mine to US Embassy for a visa interview. So I just asked one person where you are going. He was an IT professional from Bangalore. So I asked him, what is your package? Please do. I told him, please don't mind. I'm a student of migration. So I'm just curious about how people do migrate, what attracts. So I asked him. So he said he earns 22 lakhs per annum in the one of the IT companies of Bangalore. Then I said, what is your package there? He was going on H1B visa, which is merely for the employment, solo migration. And he said his package was 1.5 crore, which is just it's huge in number. Maybe you can say 10 times higher, to 20 lakhs to 1.5 crore. So similarly, I was in the different parts of the world, and I happened to see one of the Bangladeshi person in Poland, Warsaw. So he was a student of MSc, and he was in the fourth year of his 2 years MSc course. I said, why didn't you qualify this exam? You could have qualified. You have come from long distance, Dhaka, and you are continuing for 4 years. Then he said, sir, my deliberately fail ho jata. I said, क्यों? Then he said, यहाँ पे जॉब कर लेता हूँ. He was working in a kebab center, जो fried chicken का होता है. He was staying in that kebab center, having food there, and earning 1,10,000 rupees per month, which is not a salary of even assistant professor of Central University in India. So you can understand although Poland is not a developed country, though it is part of European Union and Europe, which is generally seems as a developed continent, but the Eastern Bloc is absolutely not that much good, including Ukraine and Estonia, what's happening there. But despite that, you can look at the wages of these people. Even the sweepers have handsome wages. So economy is a basic factor for attracting people to international mobility. And those who are capable of, those who are informed, what is important today? What is important today? Is it money important or information important? Information is important. People would manage, and I'll tell you how would they manage. I was just my neighboring in my flat. There was I'm giving you day-to-day examples so that you will understand and your perception to look at migration might change. So my just neighbor flatmate, he's a retired police officer. So his son wished to study in Canada, but I told him to look for some scholarship options. So he said, जाने दो ना सर कहाँ पे अभी मैं वो सब try करते रहूँ. बोलो you try, you will get because most of my students they got scholarships to just study PhD. 2 crore rupees scholarship, 2 crore rupees scholarship to study in PhD, and I have their offer letters with me. One student recently got PhD fellowship at New York University. They're absolutely free. It's not necessarily that 100 people are applying and 100 people will get. I said, you just try. Then he said, it's fine, I'll manage. Then his mother told me, "नहीं बेटा हमारे कुछ रिश्तेदार हैं वहाँ पे अमेरिका में, so they are trying to help him out to get admission there in that so and so college. So once he get admitted, they will sponsor his education, and once he completes his education, he will find job there only in Canada or America. And subsequently, he will be able to pay his debt back. That is again coming around 1.5 crore or something. So I'm just telling you information. And how would you utilize that information? How would you utilize that opportunity? So it's not that people are not migrating because they are not able to. They are able to. What do we need to do is just to channelize the migration and facilitate the migration. That's what I was just discussing with Saleh, that how could we think of facilitating migration, be it just information. The least thing what we can do is that to provide information, provide access to people. And it's not that there are a number of Indians in abroad. We can just get their contact and just find, and it's not necessarily that everyone would be, like Humayun, who will just walk down holding CV in his hand and for someone else. No, there are possibilities that they might not care sometimes. But just providing information that this person is available, this job is available, this scholarship is available. So these are the basic things that what we can do. Sponsoring comes later because that's economical, aspect, which would be challenging for if we are looking at through the social empowerment perspective. So that will come to later part. That option is also there. We'll discuss that. So I was talking about the economic aspect of migration, how economy helps, and the remittances that we receive in India are significant because most of the Indian diaspora resides in the Gulf. Indian diaspora holding NRI, holding Indian passport, and we receive every year. Subsequently, last from 4 years, we are the topmost country to receive remittances. And economy, the money that migrants are sending back to their families. And Kerala, Gujarat are one of the best models in terms of facilitating and benefiting from this international migration. This foreign remittances have helped them a lot in building their personal life, building their houses, building their education system, health system, and all the other philanthropic things. Philanthropy also, social donation, charity, educational institutions, religious institutions, and these states have been, there are various factors why these two states are, leading in migration, historical factors which are responsible. But if we talk about the migration to Gulf in general, UP, Bihar are now, taking lead in the percentage of international migration to Gulf, because they are also being, informed information. They are being informed and they are capable of able to, and they manage to go to these places, these developed countries, and send the huge remittances to India. And remittances, not only remittances directly help the individual families to improve their living standard. Be it a labor working on the streets of Kolkata, he is sending money back to his home. Though he is sending 1,000 rupees, which he is not able to send in his respective village, maybe. And these remittances are directly affecting the personal life. They are also affecting the other aspects, as I said, economy, medical, and so on. And if we talk about the India in general, last year in 2020, we received 83 billion US dollar remittances. 83 billion, which means 63,145 crore rupees just as a remittances that migrants sent to India, which is huge in number. 63,145 crore. This is data from the World Bank. And we are consecutively receiving it from last 4 or 5 years. And despite the COVID situation, despite the COVID, the global remittances reduced, whereas Indian remittances increased, because Indians have close ties with their families. They send full money, extra money to help families to help. So the direct help. Amidst the COVID-19, the 0.7%, global remittances reduced, whereas 0.3% global remittances increased in India. So, and not only this, not only economic remittances, social remittances also, we receive from the migration, which is very much part of the development. Whether it's in terms of indirectly that we are developing educational, health, religious, institutions, philanthropy. We have been to various field works in Gujarat, since field work is a part of our PhD program. So we have seen that people are able to contribute to the social philanthropy of these societies. They have adapted the villages. They are so capable, and those villages are not able to utilize the revenue that they generate through taxes and other means. They contributed to religious institutions, mandirs, masjids, and so on so. And they also do philanthropy for developing garden, developing dam, developing small ponds, and so on so things. So this kind of social indirect remittances, and the remittances in terms of ideas that you send back. If someone he migrated to USA, and there is a home construction going on, so he will send, nice design, he will instruct, he will send some goods. So these are some of the indirect ways of, remittances, which are a direct and indirect part of human development and individual personal development. And if we talk about the development and mobility, I personally find, in my observation, I find migration always helps towards the upward mobility. I never saw that people are going for the, downward mobility because of it. I always observe throughout my research and my observations, it's always help in upward mobility. Upward mobility in terms of whatever the remittances or the other benefits that migrants are receiving, starting from labor migration to all skill migration, professors, engineers, so on so, doctors, and so on so, and the unskilled migrants too. Even one is going to as a person who look after the heads in Gulf countries. or domestic workers. Despite that, despite those challenges to the domestic workers, there are challenges for them. Female worker, there are challenges for them. Male worker, there are challenges for them. But despite these challenges, my observation is that they are able to develop their personal as well as community life. This is how migration helps in upward mobilities, and there are various push and pull factors for Indians in general and Indian Muslims in particular. Those are challenges of unemployment. Those are challenges of, but unemployment help as a pushing factor for the people for international mobility. But in the case of India, it's not the way it's being expected as general. The reason being, their migration is not being facilitated, and they are not being informed. They are not being aware of. But still, if you find in some pockets of Muslim societies, you would still. How many of you relatives are in Gulf or some other countries? Can you raise hands? Even the here, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4. These 6 people's out of 10, 6 people's direct relatives are not abroad. So something is missing here. But if you go to Kerala and Gujarat, if 10 are sitting out of 10, 1 person is abroad. Either he is settled there, becoming part of people of Indian origin, PIOs, or either he is a NRI or green card holder of those respective countries. So there is something which is about information that we are lagging behind, and the facilitation of migration. I think my personal suggestion for base is, yeah, please, yeah.
In the long run, is it profitable for India?
Is it profitable?
In the long run, yeah.
It is.
But we cannot use human resources, right? Efficiently and fully. That's why they are managed to what international. So, if we can use these resources in our country, so that would be better for us. In abroad, they use Indians. Indians produce many things in abroad, and they sell, and also India will buy them. For example, travel, so in the long run, it's not profitable for India, I think. But
International migration?
is profitable. Is the national
as a country, it's saying an individual.
Now, as a country, nahi. As a country, it can be, important as a country, because migration is directly helping the
production opportunity.
That's our failure.
Yes, our government failures are economic failure. Okay, it's China.
commodity. Okay.
Population has population in China, second in India, but China conducted the one-child policy. Encouraged to who are more child. Okay. They produce many things. And their production units, huge production units that started opportunity, job opportunity.
For whom? Chinese only. Okay. But remember, China is another biggest human labor market. And the reason being, and China is the second most country to receive the remittances. And if we do not facilitate, we as a India, as a country, and we as a people of this country, so China will take over. And same thing happened in the case of India. Uh, what happened? There were so many complaints from the people who are going to Gulf. Human rights abuse were being reported. So India came up with ECR check policy, ECR, immigration check required in 2015. So what happened? If you look at the percentage of people who are migrating from India to Gulf countries, 70% of the people who are migrating to Gulf are from backward classes. Muslims, Dalits, economic backwards. So because of this ECR, and most of them were below the 10th pass. ECR made 10th pass compulsory, which has reversely affected the Indian migration to the Gulf. So the skill migration is on, but unskilled migration is being rapidly and drastically hampered, which has led Pakistan and Bangladesh to take up this opportunity. And the Pakistan, Bangladesh, Philippines, Sri Lanka, these places the migration increase. Yeah. Because we are not development projects, we don't have development projects. First of all, we do have, but because of lack of we do not have structure in a way that we could accommodate all the people. And there is also no equal opportunity. There is no inclusive development.
I think it works in demand and supply perspective. We have surplus labor, that is why we are migrating to other countries.
That is one reason. That is one reason. But this inclusiveness is another reason. The growing unemployment. Yeah, no, it's interesting. Yeah, please. Yeah.
My question to you is, what is external and internal?
Huh.
And the problem which I think internal migration of labor and skilled labor from Bihar into places like South and East, it has kind of displaced, disrupted the home labor market. Kind of. It also serves the policies of the state in promoting one facet of labor market, so that the policies of the state can also be given access into other areas. Number two is this policy that India has taken in checking migration or unskilled labor into Gulf and US. Do you see that is because at the policy level, India is trying to reinforce casteism because it has kind of kind of unskilled labor, especially from areas of South and East India, which has also resulted in creation of cities, towns, and kind of democratize the wealth in the rural cities. India is looking to make sure that wealth is concentrated in urban areas where the casteism is very high and upper caste people also go well to those areas. Specifically, look at Tamil Nadu. In Tamil Nadu, many techies from OBC, Dalit background, they have the opportunity to go outside and work and they at the same time remit money into Tamil Nadu. But if you are upper caste Brahmins, they actually do not send money back to Tamil Nadu. How do you see this?
First of all, to your observation on interstate migration, migration has the different trajectories and patterns. It varies through context to context to context. I have not studied Bengal, unfortunately, but from my observation to Kerala and to Gujarat, and to for that matter, Maharashtra, these are the and Kannada. these are some of the states which have the higher international mobility. So the first migration took place, and the migration, the gap that has been created in these states, which is being now being filled by the migration from the UP and Bihar, subsequently to the Gulf, because they are informed about the Gulf migration reaching to these countries. So now, according to new data, UP Bihar is also leading to the Gulf migration now. Kerala is in the stable position, but whereas migration from UP and Bihar is increasing to the abroad as well. So that is to find the counter. It is called counter migration. But UP Bihar migration to Kolkata could be that is also economic migration, but the gap that has been created in those countries states, that is one fact. And this is about economic migration, just economic migration, because of the comparatively better opportunities that Bengal have in as in this region. So this could be two other approaches. You can look at the pattern of migration, why it's happening. So that could be one of the reasons. Coming back to your another reading of that these backward classes or castes or minorities are sending money back to Tamil Nadu, and upper castes are not sending. That's one observation that you have. But another observation is that, in general, people who are going to as a skilled migrants, and among the skilled migrants, most of them are from the upper caste. So within that chunk, even the low caste or minorities are settling down in. This is another pattern of remittances. If they are settling down in those countries, gaining green cards and all that, so the frequency of migrate remittances slow down. They hardly send money. Therefore, if you look at the overall remittances that are coming to India, why Gulf people migrating to Gulf are sending enormous 54% remittances come from the Gulf to India. The reason being, Gulf migrants in Gulf are not being given the citizenship. Therefore, they send whole money to India. But in other way, when we talk about general to America and Europe, they are being settled, so the remittances flows from these countries are very low. Within this, if you are looking through the lens of caste, so yes, there is this possibility.
Is a reason why I said, well, if you look at the Bangladesh currently you will find making cities in Bangladesh, which have grown because of money from outside.
Exactly.
Like there's a particular city somewhere in northeast Bangladesh, which mimics some Italian city. So that is the thing. Like blocking the flight of labor vector from underdeveloped sections into Indian cities rather than foreign cities is another ploy of making sure that destitution poverty and these people do not leave destitution and poverty that fast. Which is what to foreign areas they might the upper only might be faster, which might take 10 years. If they migrate to Indian city, it might take 10 years, 20 years. So that policy wise, can we see Brahmins in there?
As I said, in general, you are reading through the lens of caste. So just skill migration is 20% when it comes to Gulf. But within the 20%, if you look at the Muslim for that matter or Dalits in that matter, it's like 2 to 3%. If it's 100% to 13% Muslims, and followed by Dalits. So, and the kind of pattern that you mentioned about Bangladesh, it is for most of the developing countries. And if you go to Kerala and Gujarat, they are absolutely developed by the foreign money. And there is the Silicon Valley in Gujarat, Gandhinagar. Absolutely, people, most of them are migrated from Europe, migrated to Silicon Valley. So that aspect is there. But actually, in our Indian academia and the discourses on migration, there is no much study through the lens of caste. This is a fact, but now some scholars are being emerging from this, field, and they are also trying to look it through this lens, and they find that there is a discrimination in the migration. But when it comes to going first going is important. So in that way, both the state as well as society is responsible because these backward classes are not being skilled first, not being given quality education. They are already being. More importantly, that's what I was trying to make, and in fact request the base to facilitate migration. Information is not there. And this is the same thing that we were discussing with one of the professors of the Mumbai University. He was asking me how to do this. So I was telling them, what could be the possible channels that we could, uh, facilitate this migration. And coming back to his question, can it be, helpful in a longer term? It's absolutely helpful. I'm not talking about goods and its productions. I'm talking about human mobility, and it's a direct impact on the individual life, individual families. So in this sense, I think it's absolutely, helpful and development in that. What we did in terms of Rafael and all that, that's government is different. In terms of people, and there is the India Migration Center, which tries to, you know, which one of the aim of this India Migration Center is to uh, facilitate migration, but which is not in many extent. We don't have. But if you go to Kerala, just if you go to Kerala, man, there is a ministry of there is a wing to work on the migration, and there are district centers to facilitate the migration because they realize the importance of migration. It's very forward state. Center for Development Studies bring every year Kerala Migration Survey report consecutively. Professor Sakaria, Professor Rajan, they played a huge role in making people and policymakers and politicians to understand this migration is important. And migration is important to sponsor. It's sponsored. 2014's BJP election was absolutely sponsored by the Indian diaspora, the upper caste diaspora, across the nations. Please come to your point. Yeah.
But he told me what he has produced in USA. Indian government, Indian USA company sold them 3 or 4.
They earn in Mumbai. So you mean person who is in Mumbai is earning more than person who is in USA? You mean that?
You see, one person goes from there, works for a company or something. Then they say,
Okay. Then I think that productivity is different part. Yeah, yeah. I come to your point. I see. I come to your point when you say it's a kind of brain drain. There is a huge debate in migration, brain drain. But that's a very ideal debate. But in reality, it's not, fitting anywhere. Software engineer in India is not getting us, job of, even if he's getting a job, he's starting with just 13,000 rupees. 20,000 hardly he gets. There are software engineers in every gully of Maharashtra. So no, let me just quickly respond to him. And we are not able to produce that kind of jobs in India. So we are idealistic, but we are realistic too. And in reality, we are not able to facilitate this huge human resource which is being spoiled in India. To utilize that resource which is being spoiled just as a lazy, we have to channelize. We need to channelize the migration. हाँ जी, आप बोलिए.
Yeah, that is the actual point I was talking about. That people are missing that point that India is willing to provide that facilities.
Yes.
There is general perception that India is unable to use the best of the minds.
The
best of the minds are going for only for the money.
I am very much staunch nationalist, but I get a job. I'm as engineer here, and I get some 50 to 60,000. I did not hear that someone is earning more than 1 lakh rupees as an engineer. If, for that matter, 2 lakhs. He was a very senior scholar, engineer, software engineer. He was earning 22 lakhs. This never means that he is not Indian and he is going to sell something which is produced in America to back to India. Despite that, whatever his, this again never mean that he was unhappy with 22 lakhs per annum. He was happy. Life would be fine even wherever you stay, in the metropolitan city or a village in India. 22 lakhs is a handsome amount. But why does he go? Why does he opt in this job? 1.5 crore. Yeah, please. You want to say something?
I have friends in Bangladesh. I have friends from West Bengal doing the same work in Mumbai and Bangalore.
Okay.
They don't want to come to Kolkata because they will not get the same payment.
Yeah.
And even the side the example of Bangladesh, look at Bangladesh, how the freelance market is in Bangladesh. People are making so much money in Bangladesh. But they do freelance work. That same freelance market for techies and data scientists or whatever does not exist in India.
Yeah, true. Many ways. Do you want to say something?
Yes, my question is specifically about internal mobility.
Okay.
So, I want to ask a question that how this mobility or migrations influence or impact gender factor.
Sorry?
Gender factor of the society, specifically for the needs.
Okay.
So, I'm talking about the international migration.
Internal mobility.
Internal mobility. When you read an autobiography of the latest writers, you can understand how the importance of migration. So, my question is that how this affects the formation of gender or masculinity. So, if this development, this economic resources, is impact on your personal life, gender formation, and this.
In the context of the league?
Yes, context is there is only those those migration and mobility then form such kind of particular image. So my questions.
Okay. Interesting. But before understand this particular question, I'll tell you one more thing. Humans are the most migrants in the world. This is the first approach to study migration through the gender lens. Women are the topmost people, individuals who are the migrants across the world. There are more female migrants than the men. And it is not only fact that in India, but in the West as well. The first study that has been conducted by E.G. Ravenstein in 1880 of the England, and therein also he found that women are most migrant. The first migration is a marriage. So now coming back to your specific question in the context of Dalit, so the challenges that Dalit women have, in the context of internal mobility. Similar, okay, even how it works. See, I would take you further from Dalit context to we as an Indian society have been not, you know, our approaches, our perceptions are still gendered. Therefore, that has directly, indirectly effects on Dalit also in the migration. But one part of migration is that internal migration. This women in Dalit are not being, you know, empowered yet. Similarly, the Muslims for that matter, because and one part of migration is that it is also developmental for women, especially when it comes to international migration. So we cannot have a generic perception for this different context. So we have to look at what context, what pattern of migration is being taking place within the migration, internal migration. We also need to look at whether it's unskilled or skilled migration. If both male and female are skilled and educated migrants within India, so their social empowerment and through overall, response and life would be different and experiences would be different. Whereas unskilled and uneducated Dalit men and women migrate, whether it's in terms of gender roles or whether it's in terms of treatment to the female gender in migration. So the other profiles of people also, affects on the whole processes and the experiences of migration as well as the migrants. So
I think
क्या बोल रहे हैं हसन? You can listen. Sanskritization?
yes.
Okay. Yeah. One part of both the Sanskritization.
They when they get the economic resources, they want to be like upper class. So, what is the role of this mobility or this migration?
Yeah. Sanskritization, you can call it. You can call it more formulated and constructed debate about the cultural nationalism. You can take this for as a one approach to look at, and this is the not this is through the gender lens you are looking at, through the cultural lens also if you look at. So the female migrants to the developed countries, particularly from upper caste, are very much culturally conscious. That is also a result of they are the most recent migrants, contemporary migrants, which are part of the contemporary political exchanges that are taking place in India. So, subsequently, they are also politically oriented and culturally more conscious in that way. So, which has also, coming back to your point, through the gender lens, for example, one of our students was presenting a proposal and she was eulogizing the wearing of sari and bindi in diaspora. Then that women are being considered as a, again in the very 21st century, they are being considered as a caretaker or carrier of the cultural baggage. So I asked her, how could you justify this gendered dress code or gender pattern, gender culture with the gender equality debate in India. But she was saying that, sir, I just want to, appreciate or just want to highlight, women wearing sari and bindi and so on. So that's absolutely a gender-centric debate, and that trend is also increasing. The reason, as I said, the contemporary, and that is into contemporary skill migration, and those skill migrants are mostly from the upper caste and the politic, and from the quite recent time, and how they are being, culturally mobilized. So, in a similar way, coming back to this context of Dalit, male-centric approach towards migrant women or wives. So, there is this possibility of looking at how they are being trying to, women are being trying to women-centric roles in diaspora as well. And for that matter, take Muslims as well. Why should only Muslim women be the victim of, wearing niqab and all that? Why not men too? So my suggestion was to her, if you are studying dress code in diaspora, so study the dress code in diaspora, which also includes pagadi, which also includes topi, and their experiences in the society as well as in the in diaspora. In society also their experiences vary. Whether it's come in terms of Islamophobia, you talk about how Muslims are being, targeted because of their external identities in the West, which is also increasing globally. So when you apply the approach, I gave you diverse answer. The reason being, this context varies. So your approach should also diversify. You cannot put it in a single, generic framework. Yeah. Any other question and comment? Want to say something? Challenges of migration. That's what I was coming to that point. First challenge is, if it is internal migration, there are more many challenges. Internal migration is you are informed. A person living in a village, he knows that he'll get good salary, good wages, at least comparatively. Peasants, seasonal workers, they will get. They are quite sure that after doing, harvesting, they are doing nothing. So they are damn sure that they'll go to Kolkata and do anything and buy something. No, so they are informed. Yeah. Yeah. There is visible. There are visible evidence of migration. Okay. Yeah. 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 And these states are officially informing the people. They are facilitating the migration. Kerala is doing so. And some extent to Kerala through Negra. Why other states are not following? Are they simply ignorant, or they have some other agenda? No, nothing like that. They are not. Yes. No, they are not. They did not realize. They did not acknowledge the importance of migration, especially international migration. And internal migration for that matter, no states, including center to other state governments, have not responded to the internal migration. Therefore, which is the reason why millions of people were on the street when there was a lockdown. We never realized the international migration. Though today, in my most of the discussion, I tried to cover the international migration. In my previous lecture also, I was trying to, bring some literature from international migration. We talk about diaspora, we talk about international migration. What about the internal migration, which is huge? 70% people are migrant in India. Bapre, you can't imagine. All of us are migrant. Although we are from, some our social, economic profile might have changed. Therefore, we don't have that many problems. But go to streets of this locality. Look at their hygienic problems. Look at their political challenges. They are not able to vote. Crisis in the citizenship. They are economically excluded. They are not able to, have the access to the banking sectors. Not many things. And which is the state, including center and the other, state governments have failed to address the. You have to realize that there is international migration, despite the census data shows this. We are just blind to this. Now, coming back to this international problem that you have raised, as I said, Kerala realized the importance, acknowledge it, and have recommended people in the ministry to look after the issues of migrants. Their rehabilitation. It is the first state in India which talks about your idea of is it a long sustainable idea. So they started working on rehabilitation of those people who are returning back after finishing their tenure. It is the first state in India, and it is the first state which is officially sponsoring, officially in a sense, establishing, district-wise units to, uh, bring this awareness and help people to international. It's because other states have not realized. I was happy to see because UP was trying to follow that pattern. But when I attended one of the Pravasi Bharati Divas, as I said, and UP and Bihar will surpass and surpassing the migration from Kerala and Gujarat to developed countries, particularly to the Gulf. But that approach was also, I was unhappy with the UP government's approach because they have organized Pravasi Bharati Divas. In the same pattern, they have organized Pravasi UP Divas last in 2019. So their interest was to attract the people who are migrating from UP to invest in UP. But my suggestion would be not only to UP but all. You also facilitate migration from here. You also facilitate their problems. Look at their challenges, and you expect probably they'll pay back, right? Will pay back. So that's only because of the acknowledgement and informed about this particular phenomenon of migration. No, there is nothing intentional. Yeah. Francis, sir, you want to say something? You want to say something? You want to say something? You want? आप कुछ कहना चाहेंगे? Okay. So last point. Who is the first person who migrated from India to England? England? UK. UK. I think if I am a student of literature, I am a student of literature. So I would say that Sajaudeen. Because Sajaudeen and autobiography of Lutfullah. These were some of the people who migrated, not only migrated in my literary reading. Yeah, yeah. Europe and talk about that. Yeah, talk about and write about that European system. Said Gujarati or Maharashtrian or Kerala, after the Bengal Muslims started.
That's because the capital was here.
But that is in terms of literary asset, literary. But migration from these countries, sorry, these pockets, Gujarat presidency and these port cities, including Kolkata. And more interestingly, I'll tell you one more thing. These cities had, international access because of being port cities. So there was a huge migration before Lutfullah also, before Sajaudeen also. Because there were traders, there were many traders from this region. Traders from Kerala have been migrated during the time of Prophet too. And it goes back to earlier, pattern of migration. Yeah. And more importantly, that I wanted you to inform that people who migrated from these regions were not called as because Indians were there, but they were more known as Calcutta, Madrasi. हम छोटे थे तब we know quite well, we were conscious enough to remember those things. कोई मद्रासी आते थे बर्तन बेचते हमारे घर के पास. So these Calcuttas, these Madrasis were also not only known in India, but they were also known in abroad. If you look at the currency of South Africa of 1900, it has scripts in Gujarat. So these regional pockets, because of their geographical importance, they were earlier access to those international migration. Do you want to say something?
It's going to make an aggressive.
Okay.
All the Tamil people, they are not actually from Tamil Nadu. They are a
Region.
South
Madras has a region, yeah,
Indian
including
diaspora, it has Telugu people also.
who are the Calcuttias from UP and Bihar, most of them, and including Bengal, of course. So yeah, so if online, if you have any questions, you may kindly type it, and Humayun, you can read it if you can access those chat. Uh, some of the things that what I understand is that yeah, most of the things that I talk about, so inclusive developments and all that, in terms of policy perspective, there would be certain policies to facilitate the migration. Coming back to your question, both at state and at the central level, mm, which is maybe probably if we are quite serious, so maybe in 10, 20 years, we may come up with certain good policies, but inclusive policies are needed. The policies to facilitate migration is a must. We have policies to attract people because we are more fiscal oriented, monetary oriented. We want the Indian diaspora to pay back, and they are paying back in the thousands crores. But how could we? And if we could channelize this migration, not only we as a community, we as a society, but we as a nation also will be highly benefited. And another thing is that NGOs like this or similar kind of community-centric NGOs would and should come forward to take up and realize the importance of migration and facilitate the migration and channelize the human resources which are stuck in the gullies of Muslim Mohammeds. And sponsorship. You could come up with certain options like, for example, have some credit society kind of things. And if anyone is having trouble in going abroad and not able to go because of the economic reason, you may kindly sponsor this, and he would definitely and should pay back to whatever amount that he has access from this particular NGOs or societies. And one pattern could be they may kindly pay back more if they want, which shall not be compulsory. So this is what happened in one of the cases in my locality, but that was not for migration, but that was for general sponsorship. So if they pay 1 lakh, so they would happily pay some 1.10 lakhs or something, which was not compulsion, but they used to because they were helped out. So that could be one thing, and the religious relational network. There was a Kangani and Maistri migration during the colonial time, and particularly the Kangani migration was absolutely on the base of network. If a person migrating from this small village of Kolkata, so he would inform all the people in that village, and I think at least one person from that every household used to migrate with or migrate in that train. So network, relative networks will also help a lot, and probable all possibilities we shall explore, including the one that I gave an example of. Some of my neighbors had sponsored how they are trying to sponsor because they know the importance of migration, and they are damn sure they are ready to spend 1.5 crore rupees on that kid, and they are damn sure that he will pay it back. One of my colleagues, her son, he completed BTech in India and he wanted to study BTech, MTech in Harvard. So the admission fees was 1 point something crore. The total expenditure was 2 crore. But they were economically very well off from Karnataka. So he will include her grandma paid for him, and he returned that debt in just 2 years of 2 crore. 2 crore he returned in 2 years, simply 2 years. So although this amount looks very big in India, but when you look at through that perspective, migration, the uh, settled perspective, they will pay this amount back in a few months. So I think that sponsorship would also help. Okay, yeah. Okay. Chat box. Chat box. Yeah. Excuse me. I'm sorry for not being paying much attention to this online participants. But if you have any question, you can directly mute. There is one hand is being raised. You can just ask Aisha. You can directly ask, please. Okay, there is no question, but someone has raised hand, so you can directly ask, please. This is this is as Aisha. You can ask, yes, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, it was done by mistake.
Okay. You want to tell something? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. No problem. No problem. So,
In case of international migration, some people mention where Saudi Arabia, Dubai, in terms of depth, but only in terms of they want
oh yes, yes, yes. See that's see, this was that's one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons why there were so many economic and human rights exploitations of Indians migrating to Gulf because of this kafils and all that. Kafil brokers. But if you look at this pattern is being reduced. That was only in some pocket it might exist, but if you look at the contemporary, scenario, these possibilities have been reduced because the government of India, as well as the respective governments, are also looking and working on towards this kind of yeah, yeah, it's mostly in the case of, but these programs this this kind of challenges were also being very much popularized the way in which they were popularized. In reality they were not existing the way they were being portrayed. Yep, to the Gulf. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there was a possibility. There was this kind of possibility that they were being victim of this kafala, hawala was also another. So, but these systems are now being yeah. Yeah, awareness is not there, and more importantly, I was the hotel that I was staying here in Kolkata. Just next to that hotel, there was huge big crowd. I just came down in the morning, and I saw there was huge crowd. बोला भाई क्या चल रहा है यहाँ पे? Then he said, सर यहाँ पे इंटरव्यू चल रहा है. बोला किसका? वो कुछ गल्फ में जॉब है. बोला कि क्या जॉब है? They don't even know what job. आए हैं वो और they are ready to go for whatever job they get. तो दे सेड अपने इंटरव्यू पे और अपने प्रोफाइल जो भी बना के लाए थे वो एक दो पेज का सीवी बोले इसके ऊपर हमको जॉब मिलेगा. एंड ही आल्सो सेड ये जो इंटरव्यू ऑर्गेनाइजर है दे आल्सो एक्सप्लॉइट, they take money. In fact, those jobs are free of cost. They need human resource, so they said that we need these many peoples, and they tell to one of the in charge in Gulf, which will again be Indian. He'll come to India and he'll pay, I think, 1 lakh rupees or 80,000 rupees for each employment, and which will be, distributed among these people who will be, here in the selective body. So that thing is there. So I think in this kind of situation, the state intervention is must. Coming back to that policy perspective, how state is taking the policies. Yeah. So I think this is how we can curb down those kind of possibilities, but they are reduced now. Earlier it was a huge number. So with this note, I would like to thank the base office and everyone who paid attention to this small observations of mine. Thank you, all of you. Thank you. Over to you, Salil.
Thank you, Sajaudeen, for the talk. Would love to listen to it later sometime. I have a different question. I'll ask you talk to you regarding after this recording is over. বলো তো রেকর্ডিংটা অফ করে দিতে